Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Defiant, watching the strange energy readings dance across his screens. The ship had been exploring the Kepler 442 system for 3 weeks now, and every day brought new mysteries. His science, Officer Lieutenant Ryan Cole leaned over his console with a worried look on his face. The readings were unlike anything they had seen before. Jake had been exploring space for 15 years, and he thought he had seen everything. The universe was full of strange things, but this was different. The energy patterns seemed almost alive. They pulsed and moved in ways that made no sense. Ryan kept checking his instruments, but they all showed the same impossible readings. The year was 2387, and humanity had spread across 17 star systems. It had taken them over 3 centuries to build their small but growing civilization among the stars. Earth was still the center of human space, but colonies on distant worlds were becoming strong and independent. People lived good lives on planets with strange names like New Geneva and Terra Prime. Jake looked at the main screen showing the empty space around them. Nothing looked unusual to the human eye, but the sensors told a different story. Something big was happening, and he did not like it. He had learned to trust his instincts during his years in space, and right now they were telling him to be very careful. Then everything changed in an instant. The space around the Defiant filled with light, as massive shapes appeared from nowhere. Ships larger than anything humans had ever built materialized like ghosts becoming real. Each one was the size of a moon, and they blocked out the stars with their dark hulls. Jake felt his heart stop for a moment as he realized what he was seeing. The alien ships were beyond anything humanity could imagine. Their surfaces were smooth and dark like polished stone, but they pulsed with inner light. Strange patterns ran along their sides in colors that human eyes could barely see. The ships moved without any visible engines, and they made no sound in the vacuum of space. They just hung there like sleeping giants that could wake up at any moment. Ryan was frantically working at his console, trying to understand what had happened. The energy readings had spiked off the charts when the ships appeared, and now they were settling into patterns that looked almost like heartbeats. Jake ordered his crew to battle stations, but he knew it was pointless. The Defiant was a good ship, but it was tiny compared to these alien vessels. Before Jake could even think about what to do next, his communication officer, Lieutenant Amy Walker, spoke up with fear in her voice. Signals were coming in from all across human space. The same massive ships had appeared around every human colony at exactly the same time. Earth, Luna Base, Mars, New Geneva, Terra Prime, and all the other worlds were surrounded by alien vessels that had appeared from nowhere. The communication channels filled with panic as reports came in from across human space. The alien ships were not attacking, but they were clearly in position to do so. They hung in space around every human world like predators watching their prey. Colony governors and military commanders were trying to figure out what was happening, but no one had any answers. Then the aliens spoke, and their words changed everything. Every communication device in human space activated at once. Televisions, radios, computer screens, and even personal communicators all showed the same image. An alien being appeared on every screen across 17 star systems, speaking in perfect human language. The creature called itself Overseer Vex, and it did not look like anything from human imagination. Its body was tall and thin, with too many joints in places where humans had none. Its skin was pale and seemed to glow with its own light. Most disturbing of all were its eyes, which were completely black and seemed to look right through whoever was watching. Overseer Vex spoke in a voice that sounded like it came from everywhere at once. It said that humanity had been watched and studied for many years. The aliens called themselves the Hegemony, and they had ruled the galaxy for thousands of years. They had seen many species rise and fall, and they knew how to judge which ones were dangerous. The alien explained that humanity had been evaluated and the results were not good. Humans were too aggressive, too unpredictable, and too willing to fight rather than submit. These traits made them dangerous to the natural order of the galaxy. The Hegemony had seen species like humanity before, and they all ended the same way. They destroyed themselves or they destroyed others. But the Hegemony was merciful. They offered humanity a choice. The first option was submission. Humans would surrender completely and allow themselves to be changed. The Hegemony would alter human nature to remove the dangerous traits. Humans would become peaceful and obedient, and they would serve the greater good of the galaxy. They would live, but they would no longer be truly human. The second option was simpler. Humanity could refuse and face extinction. The hegemony had the power to destroy every human world in a matter of hours. They had done it before to other species that refused to submit. It was not cruel, it was simply necessary. Dangerous species could not be allowed to spread their chaos throughout the galaxy. To prove their power, 3 uninhabited moons in the outer system simply vanished. The massive alien ships fired weapons that turned solid rock and metal into nothing but scattered atoms. The demonstration was quick, clean, and absolutely terrifying. Any doubt about alien capabilities died with those moons. Overseer Vex gave humanity 72 hours to make their choice, submit and be changed, or refuse and be destroyed. There would be no negotiation, no compromise, and no third option. The alien ships would wait and watch, but they would not leave. When the time was up, humanity would give their answer, or the answer would be given for them. Jake Morrison sat in his captain's chair staring at the alien ships surrounding his vessel. Across human space, billions of people were having the same conversation. What did it mean to be human, and was it worth dying for? The debate would rage for 3 days, but the choice would define humanity forever. Admiral Lisa Carter stood in the command center of Luna Station, watching Earth through the massive windows. The blue and green world looked peaceful from here, but she knew that billions of people were facing the hardest decision in human history. Around Earth and every other human world, the alien ships waited like dark angels of judgment. The 72-hour deadline was ticking away, and humanity was tearing itself apart with debate. Every colony, every city, and every family was having the same argument. Should they submit to the aliens and lose their humanity, or should they fight and probably die? It was not an easy choice, and good people were on both sides. On New Geneva, Governor Amy Richardson watched crowds fill the streets outside her office. Some people carried signs demanding submission because survival was more important than pride. Others held banners calling for resistance, no matter what the cost. Children looked at their parents with confusion in their eyes, not understanding why the adults were so frightened and angry. The protesters shouted at each other across police barriers, but their words were the same ones being spoken in every human home. Dr. Helen Murphy, the most respected scientist in human space, appeared on news programs arguing for submission. She said that humanity could not fight the impossible, and that staying alive was more important than staying the same. If they submitted, at least some part of humanity would survive, even if it was changed. But General Peter Kane spoke for the other side with equal passion. He said that humans without their fighting spirit would not really be humans at all. They would be empty shells, wearing human faces but lacking human souls. He would rather see humanity die as itself than live as something else. Many veterans and soldiers agreed with him, but so did teachers and farmers and shop owners. President Daniel Brooks sat in his office in Washington, trying to make sense of reports from across human space. The debate was close, very close. Some colonies were voting to submit while others demanded resistance. Families were breaking apart as husbands and wives disagreed about what choice to make. It was the hardest decision any species had ever faced. Captain Morrison was still trapped in the Kepler system surrounded by alien ships, but his science officer Ryan Cole had made a disturbing discovery. The massive alien vessels were not just sitting idle. They were building up energy in their weapon systems and positioning themselves for maximum destruction. The aliens were not bluffing about their ability to destroy human worlds. Ryan showed Morrison the energy readings, and they both understood what it meant. The alien ships around Earth and the colonies were preparing for immediate attack. If humanity chose resistance, the alien response would be swift and total. There would be no time for second thoughts or final messages. The aliens would strike, and human civilization would end in minutes. But even knowing this, many humans still could not bring themselves to submit. Captain Beth Jenkins, commanding the exploration ship UES Pioneer, sent a message that spread throughout the fleet. She said that she had spent her whole life exploring the galaxy and meeting new challenges. She could not imagine becoming something tame and obedient just to stay alive. If those were the only choices, she would choose death. The debate raged in the halls of government and in family kitchens. Religious leaders were divided, with some saying that God wanted humanity to survive at any cost, while others argued that the human spirit was sacred and must not be surrendered. Scientists calculated the odds and found them hopeless, while philosophers debated what it meant to be truly human. Commander Steve Adams sent a message from his patrol ship near Mars that became famous across human space. He said that his grandfather had fought in the Third World War, and his great-grandfather had died fighting tyranny in the old days on Earth. Adams said he could not dishonor their memory by bowing down to new masters, no matter how powerful they were. He would rather join his ancestors than betray what they had died to protect. But Dr. Murphy responded with equal emotion. She said that dead heroes could not protect their children or build a better future. She argued that submission was not cowardice but wisdom. The aliens offered humanity a chance to survive and grow in a new way. It might not be the future humans had planned, but it would still be a future. Death offered nothing but darkness and the end of all human dreams. The clock kept ticking and the decision grew closer. President Brooks called together the colony governors and military leaders for a final vote. Each world would choose for itself, but the decision would be announced as one voice for all humanity. The aliens had made it clear that there could be no divided response. Humanity would submit or resist as a single species. The voting was done in secret, and the results were painfully close. 17 worlds voted on whether to submit or resist, and the final tally shocked everyone. By just 3% of the vote, humanity chose defiance over survival. It was barely a majority, but it was enough. The decision was made, and there could be no going back. Admiral Carter received the final vote count and felt the weight of the decision settle on her shoulders. She commanded 1,200 ships against an alien fleet that numbered over 50,000 vessels. Every human ship represented millions of people who had chosen to die free rather than live as slaves. The mathematics were impossible, but the choice was made. She opened a communication channel to Overseer Vex and spoke the words that would define humanity forever. Her voice was steady and clear as she delivered the message that had been decided by the narrowest of margins. She told the alien overseer that humanity had made their choice and they refused to submit. They would not surrender their nature to preserve their lives. The alien response came immediately. Overseer Vex appeared on screens across human space, with those terrible black eyes showing no emotion at all. The alien said that humanity had chosen extinction, and they had 1 hour to reconsider their decision. After that, the hegemony would do what was necessary to protect the galaxy from human chaos. Admiral Carter looked out at her small fleet facing impossible odds. She thought about all the people who had voted for this moment and all those who had voted against it. Both sides had been afraid, but they had made their choice together. She opened another channel to Overseer Vex and spoke words that would echo through history. She told the alien that humanity had reconsidered their decision, and the answer was still no. The hegemony struck with overwhelming force, and humanity learned what real power looked like. The alien ships opened fire at exactly the same moment across 17 star systems, and human civilization began to die. Orbital defenses that had taken centuries to build vanished in seconds under weapons that turned matter into energy, and energy into nothing. Luna Base was the first to fall. Admiral Carter watched from her flagship as the moon base where she had trained as a young officer simply disappeared. One moment it was there, broadcasting evacuation orders to Earth, and the next moment there was only empty space and scattered debris. The alien weapons left no wreckage worth mentioning, just dust drifting in the solar wind. Earth's orbital platforms lasted slightly longer, but not by much. The massive defense stations that protected humanity's home world fired everything they had at the alien ships. Nuclear missiles, plasma cannons, and kinetic bombardment weapons all struck the enemy vessels without leaving so much as a scratch. The alien ships absorbed the attacks like rocks absorbing raindrops and continued their methodical destruction. Mars Colonial Authority broadcast their final transmission as the planet's atmosphere began to burn. Governor Tony Walsh spoke calmly into his microphone even as the sky outside turned to fire. He said that Mars had always been a frontier world where people came to build something new. Now they were building something else, an example for the galaxy to remember. His transmission cut off as the planet's surface melted under alien fire. But humanity refused to die quietly, and that made all the difference. Captain Morrison, trapped in the Kepler system, had been studying the alien ships for 3 days, and his science officer, Ryan Cole, had made an incredible discovery. The massive vessels had a weakness that nobody expected to find. Their power systems created interference patterns that could be exploited by ships willing to get very close. The discovery came by accident, when a damaged probe drifted into one of the alien ships. Instead of being destroyed, the probe's electronics went wild and started sending impossible readings. Ryan realized that the alien power cores created a kind of feedback loop when foreign technology got too close. It was dangerous knowledge because exploiting it meant flying directly into the alien ships and probably dying in the process. Morrison immediately transmitted the information to Admiral Carter and every other human ship that could receive it. The message spread through human space faster than the alien weapons could silence the transmitters. It was not much hope, but it was something, and humans had always been good at making something out of nothing. Admiral Carter was down to fewer than 300 ships after the first alien attack, but she understood what Morrison's discovery meant. Human vessels could hurt the alien ships, but only by ramming directly into their power cores. It was suicide, but it was also the only chance humanity had. She sent out the call for volunteers, knowing that everyone who responded would die. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Every surviving human ship, from military dreadnoughts to civilian cargo haulers, volunteered for the final attack. Captain Beth Jenkins aboard the UES Pioneer was among the first to respond. She said that she had spent her career exploring the unknown, and this was just one more journey into uncharted territory. She would see what lay beyond death and report back if she could. Commander Steve Adams piloted a converted mining ship called the Hard Worker toward the alien fleet surrounding Earth. His vessel had been hauling asteroid ore just a week ago, but now it carried the hopes of his entire species. Adams spoke to his crew over the intercom as they approached the massive alien ships. He told them they were making history and that their children's children would remember this day. The first ramming attack came as a shock to the aliens. Adams dove the Hard Worker directly into the energy core of an alien dreadnought, and both ships vanished in a burst of light that could be seen from Earth's surface. For a moment, the alien fleet hesitated, as if surprised that their victims were fighting back in such an unexpected way. That moment of surprise cost them 12 more ships. Captain Jenkins followed Adams into death and glory, driving the Pioneer into the heart of another alien vessel. Her final transmission became legend across human space. She said that she was proud to die free, and that the galaxy would remember what humanity chose when faced with impossible odds. The Pioneer and the alien ship it struck disappeared together in a flash of annihilation. More human ships followed, diving into the alien fleet like missiles, seeking their targets. Captain Roy Fisher commanded the merchant vessel, Lucky Strike, and he laughed as he flew it into an alien battleship. Commander Kelly Brown piloted the research ship Discovery on its final mission, taking 2 alien escorts with her when she died. Each human death cost the aliens ships and lives they had not expected to lose. The mathematics were still impossible, but something unexpected began to happen. Other species across the galaxy had been watching the human resistance through intercepted communications, and they began to remember things they had forgotten. On distant worlds, enslaved peoples heard human voices choosing death over surrender, and they began to question their own submission. The planet Zephyria had been conquered by the hegemony 800 years ago, and the native Corvani had learned to keep their heads down and obey without question. But when they heard Admiral Carter's final transmission to Overseer Vex, the older Corvani began to tell stories they had not spoken in centuries. They remembered when their people had been free and proud before the aliens came. On Altair Prime, the conquered Zenthi had served the hegemony for over 1,000 years. They were skilled in technology and had helped build many of the alien ships now fighting humanity. But as they listened to human commanders choosing hopeless battle over safe surrender, the Zenthi began to access computer systems they were supposed to leave alone. They started asking questions about their own history, and they did not like the answers they found. The human fleet was dying, but their example was spreading faster than their destruction. Admiral Carter commanded only 17 ships now, but those ships kept fighting with everything they had. Each human vessel that died took alien ships with it, and each alien death was broadcast across the galaxy by species the hegemony thought were completely broken. Overseer Vex found himself facing something the hegemony had never encountered in 10,000 years of rule. Rebellion was spreading from species to species like a disease, and it all started with humans who refused to be reasonable. The aliens had expected to crush human resistance in hours, but the battle was stretching into days, and more importantly, it was inspiring others to remember their own capacity for defiance. Captain Morrison, still alive in the Kepler system, received an impossible transmission on a frequency that should not have existed. Alien ships were appearing throughout the galaxy, but they were not hegemony vessels. The Corvani rebel fleet that everyone thought had been destroyed centuries ago was emerging from hidden bases among the asteroids. The Zenthi were using their technological skills to sabotage hegemony installations. Dozens of other species were beginning to stir. The human sacrifice was becoming something much larger than anyone had imagined. The galaxy was waking up, and the hegemony discovered that their greatest fear was coming true. For 10,000 years they had ruled through overwhelming power and the knowledge that resistance was hopeless. But humanity had done something impossible by choosing death over surrender, and now other species were remembering that they too had once been free. Captain Morrison watched in amazement as alien ships appeared around his position in the Kepler system. But these were not hegemony vessels coming to finish him off. They were old, battered ships with designs he had never seen before, and they were broadcasting messages of alliance in broken human language. The Corvani had kept some of their fleet hidden for 8 centuries, and now they were ready to fight again. Admiral Thekvar commanded the Corvani rebel fleet from a ship called the Memory of Freedom. He had learned human language from intercepted transmissions, and his words were clumsy, but his meaning was clear. He told Morrison that the Corvani had watched humanity choose death over slavery, and they had been inspired to make the same choice. They were ready to die fighting rather than live serving masters they hated. The Zenthi were more subtle in their rebellion, but perhaps more dangerous. They had been the hegemony's best technicians for 1,000 years, building and maintaining the massive fleets that kept other species in line. But now they were using their access to sabotage everything they had helped create. Hegemony ships across the galaxy began suffering mysterious failures as their builders turned against them. On Earth, small groups of survivors huddled in deep shelters listening to reports from across the galaxy on jury-rigged radio sets. Commander Tony Walsh led a resistance cell through the ruins of New York, broadcasting messages of defiance that somehow reached alien listeners millions of light years away. His words were simple but powerful. He said that humans would never stop fighting, and neither should anyone else who remembered what freedom meant. Lieutenant Kelly Brown had survived the destruction of her ship and now operated a hidden transmitter from the wreckage of Grand Central Station. Her messages were picked up by Zenthi technicians who relayed them to other enslaved species. She told listeners that Earth was burning, but the human spirit was still alive. Every day that humans continued to resist proved that the hegemony could be beaten. The rebellion spread faster than the hegemony could contain it. Species that had submitted centuries ago began to remember their own histories of independence. The Altarians started sabotaging mining operations. The Vegan colonies began hiding food supplies from their overseers. Even the peaceful Andromedans who had never shown any signs of resistance began asking uncomfortable questions about their treatment. Overseer Vex found himself managing the first multi-front war in hegemony history. Reports flooded in from across the galaxy of uprising strikes and open rebellion. Worlds that had been quiet for centuries were suddenly burning with revolution. The humans had started something that was growing beyond anyone's ability to control. The Hegemony Council met in emergency session to discuss the crisis. For the first time in their long history, they faced coordinated resistance from multiple species. The humans were nearly extinct, but their example had infected the galaxy like a virus. Other overseers reported similar problems in their sectors. The rebellion was spreading faster than it could be crushed. Admiral Carter commanded the last 17 human ships in a running battle through the outer solar system. Her fleet was tiny, but it included vessels from 6 different alien species who had joined the fight. The Corvani ships were old, but their crews fought with desperate courage. The Zenthi provided technical support and intelligence about hegemony weaknesses. The Altarians brought weapons they had been secretly developing for decades. The combined fleet was still vastly outnumbered, but they were no longer alone. Reports came in from across the galaxy of successful attacks on hegemony installations. The Vegan colonies had seized control of their orbital defense platforms. The Andromedan research stations had gone dark after their scientists destroyed critical data the hegemony needed. Dozens of other species were contributing to the fight in their own ways. Captain Morrison found himself at the center of a growing alliance as more alien ships arrived at his position. The hidden rebel fleets had been waiting for a signal that resistance was possible, and humanity's sacrifice had provided that signal. Now ancient enemies of the hegemony were emerging from hiding places they had maintained for centuries. The rebel alliance was not unified or well organized, but it was determined. Each species fought in their own way using whatever advantages they possessed. The Corvani had ships and weapons. The Zenthi had technical knowledge and access to hegemony systems. The Altarians had been secretly building weapons for decades. The Andromedans provided intelligence and logistical support. Together, they created a threat the hegemony had never faced. But the cost was enormous. Entire worlds burned as the hegemony tried to crush the rebellion before it could spread further. Billions of beings died in the fighting as ancient hatreds boiled over into open war. The galaxy had been peaceful under hegemony rule, but that peace had been built on fear and oppression. Now that the fear was broken, the oppression could no longer be maintained. Earth survivors watched the Galactic War unfold through their hidden receivers. Commander Walsh and his team had established contact with rebel forces across the galaxy, and they served as a communication hub for the growing alliance. The irony was not lost on them. Humanity had chosen extinction to avoid slavery, but their choice had sparked a revolution that might free the galaxy. President Brooks governed what remained of humanity from a bunker deep beneath the Colorado mountains. He had led his species into what seemed like certain death, but now he found himself helping to coordinate a galactic alliance. The human government might be operating from underground shelters, but it was still functioning and still contributing to the fight for freedom. The war raged for months as more species joined the rebellion. The hegemony's response grew increasingly desperate as they realized that their entire system of control was collapsing. They had ruled through fear for so long that they had forgotten how to deal with enemies who were not afraid to die. The humans had reminded the galaxy that some things were worth dying for, and now everyone was willing to pay that price. Overseer Vex received reports of defeats and setbacks from across his territory. The humans he had dismissed as primitive and self-destructive had accomplished something his species had thought impossible. They had convinced the galaxy that the hegemony could be defeated. Now every enslaved species was testing their chains and finding them weaker than they had believed. The rebellion had grown beyond anything the humans could have imagined when they made their choice. But it had started with their refusal to surrender their essential nature, even when faced with extinction. That refusal had become an example that inspired the galaxy to remember what freedom meant. 5 years after humanity chose defiance over survival, the galaxy was free and the hegemony was broken. Not destroyed completely, but changed into something it had never been before. The Great War that began with human refusal to submit had transformed into something unprecedented in galactic history. Democracy had come to the stars, and it had come because one small stubborn species refused to bow down. Admiral Morrison stood on the bridge of the USF Liberty watching Earth slowly heal from orbit. The planet's surface still bore scars from the alien bombardment, but green was returning to the continents. Cities were being rebuilt and people were coming home from the deep shelters where they had hidden during the darkest days of the war. Children who had been born underground were seeing sunlight for the first time. The Liberty was a symbol of everything that had changed in the galaxy. Built jointly by 17 different species, it combined the best technology from across known space. Human engineering worked alongside Corvani weapon systems and Zenthi navigation arrays. Altarian shields protected crew quarters designed by Andromedan architects. The ship was proof that former enemies could work together when they shared common goals. President Brooks governed from temporary headquarters in the rebuilt city of Denver, while Washington was still being reconstructed. He had survived 5 years of war and seen humanity grow from a dying species to the founding member of a galactic alliance. The day he had led his people in choosing death over slavery now seemed like ancient history, but its effects continued to reshape the galaxy. The Galactic Charter of Free Worlds was signed in a ceremony broadcast to every inhabited system. Representatives from 43 different species gathered on New Geneva to create the first truly democratic government in galactic history. The document they signed began with words that echoed humanity's original choice, and it established principles that would have seemed impossible under hegemony rule. The charter declared that all sentient beings were created equal and possessed certain rights that could not be taken away. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness were guaranteed to every citizen regardless of species or homeworld. No government could enslave its people, and no species could be forced to submit to alien rule. The principles were simple, but they had cost millions of lives to establish. Overseer Vex had become simply Vex during the war, and now served as ambassador from what remained of the old hegemony. The alien who had once demanded human submission now worked to integrate his people into the new galactic order. He often asked human philosophers a question that seemed to haunt him. How had humanity known their choice would lead to victory, when the odds were so completely against them? Dr. Helen Murphy, who had argued for submission 5 years earlier, provided the answer that became enshrined in galactic history. She said that humans had not known they would win. They had not even hoped to win in any traditional sense. They had simply known that some things mattered more than winning, freedom mattered more than survival, and dignity mattered more than safety. Once they accepted that truth, the choice became easy. The former enemies who had become allies worked together to rebuild what the war had destroyed. Corvani engineers helped reconstruct human cities, while human doctors treated alien refugees from the fighting. Zenthi technicians shared their knowledge freely for the first time in centuries, while Altarian farmers provided food for hungry worlds. The cooperation was not perfect, but it was real and it was growing stronger. Earth's children grew up in a galaxy their parents could never have imagined. They played in parks rebuilt by alien allies and learned languages from species that had once been enemies. Human children laughed alongside young Corvani, while Zenthi youngsters shared their games with Altarian cubs. The next generation was growing up free in ways their ancestors had only dreamed about, but the cost of that freedom was never forgotten. Museums across human space preserved the memory of those who had died to make the choice possible. Admiral Carter's final transmission was played for school children who needed to understand what their freedom had cost. Her words echoed across the decades, reminding everyone that some victories required absolute sacrifice. The memorial on Luna Base listed the names of every human ship that had died in the final battle. Commander Steve Adams and Captain Beth Jenkins were remembered alongside thousands of others who had chosen certain death over uncertain slavery. Their sacrifice had lasted only moments, but its effects would last forever. They had died so that their species could remain truly human. Captain Morrison often visited the memorial when his duties brought him to Earth. He remembered the day when everything changed, and he thought about how different the galaxy might have been if humanity had chosen differently. The decision had been close, very close, and sometimes he wondered what would have happened if the vote had gone the other way. The reformed hegemony still existed, but as a democratic partner in the Galactic Alliance rather than its ruler. Former overseers worked as elected representatives, and old enemy species served together in mixed crews throughout the galaxy. The change was not complete, and probably never would be, but it was real, and it was growing stronger each year. Humanity continued to explore the galaxy, but now they did so as part of a vast alliance of free species. Human ships carried mixed crews and flew under the flag of the United Species Fleet. They still pushed into the unknown, carrying with them the knowledge that freedom was worth any price, and that the most important victory was sometimes simply choosing to fight for what mattered. The day humanity chose defiance over survival became the day the galaxy chose freedom over fear. It was remembered not as the day humans won an impossible war, but as the day they decided that some things were worth dying for. That decision had changed everything. and its echoes would continue to shape the galaxy for generations to come. In classrooms across 43 different worlds, beings of 100 different species learned about the small, stubborn species that looked at impossible odds and refused to surrender. They learned that sometimes the most important choice was not between winning and losing, but between remaining true to yourself and accepting safety at any price. The lesson was simple, but profound. Freedom was not something that could be given or taken away by others. It was something that lived in the heart and spirit of every sentient being. It could be suppressed and hidden, but it could never be completely destroyed, as long as someone somewhere was willing to choose death over slavery. The galaxy was free because humanity had made that choice and taught others to make it too.